The night was still. Too still. I sat in my car outside our home, watching the light in our bedroom window flicker like a silent confession. I wasn't supposed to be home this early. A last-minute cancellation at work had freed up my evening, but something deep in my gut told me I wasn't the only one whose plans had changed. My wife, Claire, had been distant lately, smiling too much, laughing too easily at things that weren't funny. She'd always been good at hiding things, but I knew her better than anyone. Or at least, I thought I did. I stepped out of the car, my fingers twitching with an anxious energy I couldn't shake. The gravel crunched beneath my feet as I approached the front door. It was unlocked. My breath hitched. Claire never left it unlocked. I pushed it open. The air inside smelled different, like aftershave. Not mine. Then I heard it, a voice. Low. Familiar. Too familiar. My blood turned ice. I followed the sound upstairs, my body moving on its own. The closer I got to our bedroom, the clearer the voices became. Claire's laugh. Soft. Flirty. And his voice, deep, confident. My father's voice. Something inside me shattered. I pushed the door open without knocking. And there they were. Claire, half covered by our sheets. And my father, shirtless, standing at the foot of the bed, eyes wide with shock. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just stared. Claire gasped, pulling the sheets tighter around her. My father, the man I had idolized my entire life, opened his mouth, searching for words, but what excuse could he possibly give? Ethan, Claire started, but I held up a hand. Don't, I said. My voice was calm. Too calm. She went silent. My father cleared his throat. Son, I can explain. I laughed. Actually laughed. I could feel something breaking inside me, but I didn't fight it. Explain. I echoed. You're standing in my bedroom, with my wife, and you think there's an explanation? He exhaled, running a hand through his graying hair. It's complicated. I let the words hang between us, as if they weren't ridiculous. As if they weren't the biggest insult he could have offered me. Claire reached for me, tears in her eyes. Ethan, I made a mistake. I pulled away before she could touch me. No, I said. A mistake is forgetting to lock the door. A mistake is burning dinner. This was a choice. My father took a step toward me. Son, let's talk about this. I turned on my heel and walked out. Not because I was weak. Not because I was afraid. But because I had already made up my mind. They had no idea what was coming next. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my car, parked just outside the city, watching the headlights blur into streaks of white and red. My mind was on fire, replaying the moment over and over. My wife. My father. Together. The humiliation was unbearable. I knew what I had to do. By morning, I returned home. Claire was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, eyes swollen from crying. My father was gone. Maybe he had enough shame to crawl back into whatever hole he came from. She looked up at me, hopeful, as if there was a chance I had calmed down, that maybe, just maybe, I would forgive her. She had no idea. Ethan, I held up a hand. I don't want to hear it. She nodded quickly, relieved that I wasn't shouting, that I wasn't storming out of her life. But she didn't realize that silence wasn't forgiveness. Silence was planning. I sat down across from her. I need time, I said, my voice steady. This is a lot. She exhaled shakily, nodding. I understand. I looked at her, tilting my head slightly. Do you? She hesitated. I leaned forward. Tell me, Claire. When did it start? She swallowed hard. Ethan, please. When? Her lips parted, but no words came out. I could see the war inside her, the urge to lie, to soften the blow, to manipulate me into believing this was something small, something salvageable. But I already knew the answer. A year, she whispered. A year. My father had been sneaking into my home, into my bed, for an entire year. I closed my eyes. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I was holding back the storm inside me. I regret it, she added desperately. I love you. I let out a slow breath and forced a small, bitter smile. I believe you. Her eyes lit up with cautious hope. But Claire, I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper, you're going to regret it a lot more. Her breath caught. Ethan, what do you mean? I stood up, running a hand through my hair. I mean, we'll fix this. I'm not walking away from our marriage. Relief flooded her face. I took a step closer, resting a hand on her shoulder. We'll get through this, I murmured. Together. She sagged against me, sobbing. Thank you, Ethan. I promise, I'll make this right. I ran my fingers through her hair, gently, softly, the way I always had. She didn't realize I was saying goodbye. She didn't realize that forgiveness was a lie. She didn't realize that by the time I was done with her and my father, they would both be begging me for mercy. The hardest part was pretending. Pretending to move on. Pretending to heal. Pretending to still be the man she married, when in reality, the man she married was already gone. Over the next few weeks, I played the role of the devastated but forgiving husband. I let Claire see me struggle. I let her believe that I was trying to understand. And every time she cried and begged for another chance, I held her close, whispering that we'd be okay. I think she almost believed it. But she didn't notice how methodically I was dismantling her life. It started with small things. She had access to all our accounts, but I was careful. I transferred money slowly, discreetly, into an account under a different name. I watched her face as she paid the bills, frowning slightly when she noticed a charge she didn't recognize. But she never questioned it. I stopped by my father's house one night. He had the audacity to look guilty. "Ethan," he started, but I walked right past him, scanning the room like I was looking for ghosts. "Where is she?" I asked. His jaw tensed. "She's not here." I turned to face him, letting silence stretch between us until he started squirming. I wanted him to feel it. The weight of his betrayal. "You destroyed our family," I said flatly. "You stole from me." His face twisted. "It wasn't like that, wasn't it?" I laughed hollowly. "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed Mom. You betrayed your own blood." His face darkened. "Your mother and our marriage was already broken." I scoffed. "And that gave you the right to crawl into mine?" He exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. "Ethan, I know you hate me, but I love you. You're my son." I took a step forward. "No," I interrupted, voice cold. "I was your son. Now, I'm just a reminder of what you've lost." He looked like he wanted to say more, but I walked past him, toward the cabinet where he kept his prized whiskey collection. I poured myself a glass, watching his reflection in the glass. "You know, Dad," I murmured, swirling the drink, "it's funny. You always taught me that trust is like glass. Once it's broken, you can never fix it." I turned to face him, raising the glass in mock salute. "I hope you remember that when everything you love starts slipping through your fingers." I left without another word. It was a warning. The last one he'd get. Because this was no longer about heartbreak. It was about making them pay. I had never been a cruel man. Before this, I had never even considered revenge. I had been the kind of man who believed in fairness, in working things out, and forgiveness. But betrayal changes a man. And my wife, my father, had turned me into something I never thought I could be. Something relentless. Something patient. Something dangerous. Claire had no idea I had been draining our accounts. She still clung to the illusion that we were healing. She would wrap her arms around me at night, whispering about our future, making empty promises that I no longer cared to hear. I would hold her back, just tight enough to make her feel safe. But every time she fell asleep, I would stare at the ceiling, imagining the moment she realized everything she loved was slipping away. I started small. Claire had a closet full of designer clothes, things she had accumulated over the years, spending my money with no hesitation. I began selling them online. Not all at once, of course. Just a piece at a time, just enough to go unnoticed. Her favorite handbag? Gone. The expensive diamond earrings I bought her for our anniversary? Sold. She barely noticed at first, too caught up in her own guilt to pay attention. But one night, as she was getting ready for dinner, she frowned, rummaging through her jewelry box. "Have you seen my sapphire necklace?" she asked, her voice laced with confusion. I barely looked up from my phone. "No. Maybe you misplaced it." She hesitated but eventually nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, maybe." It was almost too easy. Meanwhile, I had hired a private investigator to dig into my father's affairs, his finances, his job, his weaknesses. It wasn't hard to find dirt on him. A man like him, so confident in his success, never believed he could fall. But they all fall. I found out he had been taking risks in his business, bad investments, shady deals. He was drowning in debt, barely holding onto the facade of a successful businessman. That was the first thing I would take from him. One evening, Claire came home to find me at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop, a glass of whiskey in my hand. She looked hesitant, as if she wasn't sure whether I was in a forgiving mood. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. I looked up, offering her a small smile. "Yeah, just looking at some investments." She brightened. "That's good, right? I mean, you're looking toward the future." "Something like that," I murmured. What I didn't tell her was that I had just pulled out the last of my investments from my father's company, ensuring that his business, his legacy, was about to collapse. She didn't need to know that yet. The next morning, I got the call. "It's done," my PI said. "Your father is ruined. His company is about to declare bankruptcy." I let the words sink in. My father, the man who had taken everything from me, was about to lose everything. His business, his reputation, his comfortable life, it was all crumbling. "Good," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "He's going to come to you for help," the PI warned. "You're his last hope." I smiled coldly. "I know." And sure enough, later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. "Dad?" I answered smoothly, as if I had no idea what was happening. "Ethan." His voice was strained, filled with the kind of desperation I had been waiting to hear. "I need to see you. It's important." I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. "Of course, Dad. Why don't you come over?" When he arrived, he looked different. Not the confident, powerful man I had grown up fearing. No, he looked tired, beaten, and I loved it. "I'm in trouble," he admitted as he sank into the chair across from me. I raised an eyebrow. "Trouble?" He ran a hand through his graying hair. "The business, it's failing. I made some bad decisions. I need your help, son." I took a sip of my drink, letting the silence stretch between us. Then, finally, I tilted my head. "You need my help?" I echoed. His jaw tightened. "Yes. Like the way I needed you to stay away from my wife." I asked, my voice deceptively calm. He flinched. "Ethan, I leaned forward. "You came into my home. You took what was mine. And now you want me to save you." His hands curled into fists. "I made a mistake. But I'm still your father." I laughed, shaking my head. "No, Dad. You're just a man who destroyed everything he touched. And now it's your turn to lose." His face paled. "Ethan, please." I stood, looming over him. "Get out of my house." He hesitated, as if trying to find another argument. But the look in my eyes must have told him there was no point. He left without another word. And it felt good. Claire, of course, was oblivious to all of this. She still thought I was healing, still thought we were rebuilding. But that illusion wouldn't last much longer. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, she reached for my hand. "I know I hurt you," she said softly. "But I really believe we're getting better. I feel closer to you." I forced a small smile. "Me too, Claire." Her shoulders sagged with relief. "I was thinking." She hesitated, biting her lip. "Maybe we could take a trip. Just the two of us. Get away from everything and start fresh." I pretended to consider it. "That sounds nice," I said. Her eyes lit up. "Really?" "Yeah," I murmured. "A fresh start sounds perfect." She had no idea. She had no idea that I had already emptied her savings. That her credit cards were about to be declined. That when she finally checked her bank account, she would find nothing left. She had no idea that I had already spoken to a divorce lawyer. That I had gathered every piece of evidence I needed to ruin her in court. She had no idea that when she woke up tomorrow, she would wake up to nothing. And the best part? She still thought I loved her. Claire woke up to a nightmare she didn't see coming. I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee as I watched her stumble into the room. She was still in her robe, hair tangled from sleep, eyes filled with that lazy morning haze, until she saw my face. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know how wrong. "Good morning," I greeted smoothly, setting my mug down. She hesitated. "Morning." Her voice trailed off as she studied me, searching for clues. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit. We need to talk." Her lips parted slightly, and she took a shaky breath before obeying. She sat down slowly, gripping the edge of the table as if bracing herself. I slid my phone toward her. "Check our bank account." She frowned, clearly confused, but picked up the phone and opened the banking app. I watched her face as her expression shifted from confusion to horror. "Where?" Her voice broke. "Where's our money?" I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms across my chest. "Gone." Her hands trembled as she refreshed the page, as if it were some kind of mistake, as if it would somehow magically reappear. But it wouldn't, because I had drained every last cent. Her eyes shot up to mine, wide with panic. "Ethan, what did you do?" I tilted my head slightly, as if I were surprised by her reaction. "What did I do?" I echoed. "You mean after you spent a year betraying me? After you slept with my father in the bed I bought? You mean after you tore our marriage apart?" She swallowed hard. "I thought we were moving past that." I laughed. A cold, bitter laugh. Oh, Claire, did you really think I would ever forgive you? Her breath hitched. Sweetheart, I continued, my voice dripping with venom, I let you believe I was healing. I let you feel safe. I let you think we had a future. I leaned forward, my eyes locked onto hers. But the truth is, I've been planning this from the moment I found out. Tears welled in her eyes. Ethan, please. No, my voice was sharp, cutting through her plea like a blade. You don't get to beg. You don't get to cry. You don't get to be the victim here. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Let me explain, she whispered. I slammed my fist against the table, making her flinch. Explain what? That it was a mistake? That you didn't mean it? I scoffed. Save it. She shook her head frantically. I didn't do this to hurt you. I cut her off with a smirk. But I will hurt you, Claire. In ways you can't even imagine. Her lip trembled. What are you going to do? I stood up, towering over her. I already did it. She blinked up at me, silent. I pulled out a folder from the drawer and dropped it on the table in front of her. Divorce papers, I said simply. She stared at them, unmoving. I took everything, I continued. Every account, every asset, every credit card. Your name is on nothing. You have nothing. She sucked in a sharp breath. You wouldn't. I smirked. Oh, I would. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the documents, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. You'll be out of this house by the end of the week, I added. And don't bother trying to stay with him. He has nothing either. Her head snapped up. What? I grinned. Oh, Claire. Did you really think I'd just destroy you? No. My father got what he deserved, too. She shook her head in disbelief. Ethan, please. I ruined his business, I continued, relishing the way her face crumbled. He's broke. Penniless. Just like you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You didn't. I grabbed my coffee and took another slow sip, watching her unravel. Oh, I did. Her breathing was ragged now, her hands gripping the papers like they could somehow save her. I leaned in close, my voice dropping to a whisper. And the best part? You deserve every bit of this. She let out a broken sob. I stepped back, letting the weight of my words sink in. You should go pack, I said calmly. Your time here is almost up. She stayed frozen in place, tears streaming down her face. I turned my back on her and walked away. But I wasn't done yet. I had one last move to make. Destroying Claire and my father financially wasn't enough. They needed to feel the humiliation I had felt. They needed to know what it was like to be stripped bare, exposed for the world to see. So I made sure everyone knew. The next morning, Claire's phone blew up with messages. Friends, family, coworkers. All of them had seen the emails, the screenshots, the evidence. I had sent everything to everyone she knew. I made sure she had nowhere to hide. And my father? I had sent his company's entire board the details of his personal disgrace, his business failures, his infidelity, his betrayal of his own son. By noon, he had resigned in shame. By evening, he had called me. I answered on the first ring. Ethan, he rasped. His voice was hollow. Dad, I said smoothly. Enjoying your new life? Silence. Then, finally, a broken whisper. Why? I smirked. Because you deserved it. He let out a shaky breath. I lost everything. I tilted my head. And how does that feel? He didn't answer. I leaned back in my chair, satisfied. Now you know how I felt. More silence. Then, I wish I could take it back, he whispered. I laughed softly. Yeah? Well, you can't. And then I hung up. Claire didn't leave by the end of the week. She left that night. She couldn't handle it. The whispers, the judgment, the pitying looks. She packed a single suitcase and left without a word. As I watched her drive away, I felt nothing. No sadness. No regret. No second thoughts. Just satisfaction. Because in the end, she and my father had made their choice. And I had made mine. And the best part? They would never recover. The house was empty. Not just physically, but in a way that reached deeper. The air felt hollow, the walls silent in a way they had never been before. Claire was gone. My father was ruined. And yet, as I sat in the dim light of the living room, I realized something unsettling. I had won. So why didn't I feel anything? I should have been celebrating, savoring their downfall. But instead, an odd emptiness gnawed at me. A quiet, creeping thought, what now? The revenge had been meticulous. Perfect. But what happens after the fire burns out? That night, I didn't sleep. By morning, the world had changed. Claire had deleted all her social media, vanished from our friends' lives like a ghost. My father had left town, retreating into whatever pit he could find to lick his wounds. He had called me one last time before leaving. "I know I can't fix this," he had said, voice hollow. "But I need you to know. I did love you, Ethan." I had laughed. "That's the funny thing, Dad. You loved me. You just didn't love me enough." Click. And that was the last time I ever heard his voice. For weeks, I floated through life in a daze. I went to work. I exercised. I ate. I slept. But there was no meaning in any of it. Revenge had given me purpose. Now that it was over, there was nothing left. I thought I'd feel free, but I only felt adrift. One night, I found myself in front of a bar I hadn't been to in years. A place I had taken Claire when we were still young, still happy. I sat at the counter, nursing a whiskey, when I heard a voice behind me. "Didn't expect to see you here." I turned. It was Dave, my best friend. The one person who had stood by me through everything. "You look like hell," he said, sliding onto the stool beside me. I smirked. "Thanks." He studied me for a moment. "You did it. You took them both down." I nodded. "So why do you look like you lost?" I exhaled, staring into my drink. "Because I don't know who I am without the anger." Dave didn't speak for a while. Then, finally, he sighed. "Ethan, I supported you through all of this. But now, you have to move forward." I shook my head. "And do what?" He clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Live." But I didn't know how. 3 months later, just as the numbness had begun to fade, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something told me to answer. "Hello." Silence. Then, a shaky breath. "Ethan." My blood turned to ice. "Claire." I hadn't heard her voice since the night she left. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold. More silence. Then, "I need help." I almost laughed. "You have some nerve calling me." "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "But I have nowhere else to go." I should have hung up. I wanted to hang up. But something about the way she said it, so broken, so desperate, made me pause. "What happened?" She let out a shaky breath. "I made a mistake." I clenched my jaw. "Yeah, you did. A huge one." "No, Ethan. Not just with you." Her voice cracked. "I got involved with the wrong people." Something about the way she said it sent a chill down my spine. I knew I should have walked away. But instead, I asked, "Where are you?" And just like that, I was being pulled back in. When I found Claire, she was a mess. She was thinner, her eyes sunken. She looked nothing like the woman I had once loved, or the woman I had once destroyed. She had gotten mixed up with dangerous people. Debt collectors. Loan sharks. She had borrowed money to survive after I had wiped out her finances, and now, they were coming for her. And somehow, some way, I felt responsible. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because I had planned every part of her downfall. I had pushed her off the cliff. Now she was hitting the bottom. I told myself I didn't care, that this wasn't my problem. But when I saw the bruises on her arm, the fear in her eyes, something inside me cracked. I had wanted to ruin her, but not like this. And for the first time since it all began, I hesitated. Did I really want her to suffer forever? Or was there still a part of me, no matter how small, that cared? I clenched my fists. "What do you want from me, Claire?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Help me." And against every ounce of logic, I did. Helping Claire didn't mean I forgave her, but it meant that I was done holding on to the past. I paid off her debt, not to save her, but to close the door on her for good. I didn't do it out of love. I did it because I was tired. Tired of revenge. Tired of carrying the weight of our history. She looked at me as I handed her the last payment. "I don't deserve this." I smirked. "No, you don't." A single tear slid down her cheek. "Do you still hate me?" I thought about it. Then I shook my head. "No." She swallowed hard. "Will I ever see you again?" I didn't answer. I just walked away. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. Months passed. Then years. I moved to a new city. Started fresh. Found new purpose. One day, I got a letter. No return address. It was from Claire. She wrote, "You once said that trust is like glass. Once it's broken, you can never fix it. I believe that now. But I wanted to thank you for saving me, even after what I did. I hope you're happy, Ethan. You deserve to be." I read the letter once. Then I burned it. Not out of anger. Not out of hate. But because I was finally done with that chapter of my life. Because revenge wasn't the ending I needed. Letting go was. And that was the real victory.